Hi everybody, my name is Hannah and this is Pepper and Pine, and I have a project to share with you today. We are in the middle of our owl unit study and we were inspired by this book by Laurence Pringle called Owls, Strange and Wonderful. We decided to make our own watercolor version of these beautiful feathers. I used my Silhouette Cameo to cut out feathers, and we also found two in nature. That's a barn owl feather on the right and a western screech owl feather on the left. We are going to be watercoloring these with our distress inks. But first I want to show you how I made those cutouts of those feathers. I'm using my Silhouette Cameo machine. It is a digital die cutting machine. I'm showing you here that I've adjusted the blade to be a size 10, which means it's going to cut nice and deep. I'm using my watercolor paper by Fabriano. It is 90-pound watercolor paper. Alright, so I'm in my Silhouette Cameo program and I have a number of free downloaded templates. You can find them at the Silhouette store. And I am just going to remove some of those extra cut pieces out of the feather, so I just have the silhouette of the feather because that's all we need for this project. And I'm going to put as many as I can on one sheet of paper. I want a couple of different sizes and shapes. And now it's time to send it over to my machine where it's going to cut for me all of those beautiful designs. I end up making 2 sets, but honestly we could have made a whole lot more because it was a lot of fun to make these, even though we did have a couple of challenges that I'm going to share with you in a little bit. Okay, so I'm going to remove that from the machine, and then it's super easy to remove the paper from that little sticky mat. You just peel it up, and because I use such a deep blade, it cuts super easily. Okay, so I'm going to take the rest of these off and set them aside, and we are going to dive into our distress inks, and I'm going to pull a number of colors that are going to work for this project. I need a lot of neutrals and light tones, some browns, some grays, and a little bit of black. So I have a number of colors that are going to work, but I still feel like it was a little bit lacking for the types of feathers we were trying to represent. Okay, so all the names of the distress inks that I'm using for this project are listed on my website at the blog post that accompanies this video. You can find that link down in the description box below. I'm using this non-porous surface in order to basically just squish my ink pads down onto it. It gives me just enough color to work for this project. Okay, so I'm dividing up the feathers and our watercolor brushes, and I just have all of the supplies out here ready for us to work on. This is for a unit study for our homeschool, so I have my 8-year-old daughter on the right and my 12-year-old son on the left working alongside with me. I'm doing my example in the middle. I like to have 1 or 2 examples done before I actually help them, but in this case I'm just working alongside with them. But you can see that they're a lot slower at doing this. Once I get one done and they can see it, then it's a lot easier for them to visualize what they are trying to do. I found that it was actually pretty challenging trying to copy from the book as well as copy from our real life specimen. For some reason, doing these feathers was a little bit more challenging than I expected. Now, they look beautiful in the end, but as far as representing the specimens that we are trying to watercolor, I found that they did not look the same, but that's okay. This is a great activity to get the spirit of the project, and more importantly, I found that by the end of this project, it really helped us hone in on our powers of observation so that we could really fine-tune what we were seeing and try to add those details into our project. Okay, so I'm pulling out some of our Winsor Newton watercolors, and this was because I was trying to get some more of those neutral colors as well as some creams and some light tans, and I felt like I needed a few more varieties. And they turned out just as well, whether I use the Winsor Newton watercolors or the distress inks. I think whatever you have, you can work with what you have on hand. You don't need to go out and buy special products for this project. I would recommend some kind of translucent paint like a watercolor paint versus an opaque paint like acrylics or oil paints. But I think you could find some really fine results using those kinds of paints as well. I'm trying one more here. This one represents one of the feathers that I saw in the book. I've tried a lot of different techniques, starting with the spine of the feather or starting with the colors, doing them in bands or doing them at an angle. And I had a lot of fun with it, and I think we want to revisit this project again. Overall, I think that this was a really great way to observe those feathers and do an artistic representation of the project. Of course, you do not need a Silhouette Cameo to do this. You could just freehand a feather shape on a piece of watercolor paper and then kind of fill it in that way. I think there's a lot of ways that you could do this kind of project. If you want to see some of the other projects that we are working on with our owl main lesson block or our bird unit study, you can tap on the screen right now. You can find more information about the products that I use down in the description box below. And don't forget that if you want to see how our homeschool is progressing on a daily basis, you can find me on Instagram at Pepper and Pine.